Get up, now. I don't know how you got in here, but that seat is mine.
The voice cut sharply through the first-class cabin, loud enough to turn heads. Elena Brooks didn't look up. She simply adjusted her noise-canceling headphones and continued scrolling on her tablet, her expression calm, almost detached. That only made things worse. A manicured hand slammed onto her tray table, rattling her glass of sparkling water.
Are you deaf?
The woman snapped.
I said move. That's my seat. Someone call security.
A few passengers glanced over. Some watched quietly, curious. Elena slowly lifted her eyes. Calm, steady, unimpressed. And the woman standing in front of her had absolutely no idea that this moment, this single outburst, was about to destroy everything she thought she controlled. 3 hours earlier, the rain had been pouring against the glass walls of the private lounge at JFK Airport, a steady rhythm that usually soothed Elena. Tonight it didn't. She sat alone in the corner, dressed in an oversized charcoal hoodie, black joggers and worn sneakers. No makeup, hair tied back loosely. To anyone passing by, she looked like a tired student, not the CEO of Novacore Systems, not the woman who had just finalized the quiet acquisition of an international airline empire. That news would break tomorrow. Tonight she wanted anonymity. She wanted to see things as they really were, without special treatment, without fear in people's eyes. Her phone buzzed softly. Marcus, board meeting in Zurich is confirmed. And please, try not to start a war before landing. A faint smile crossed her lips. No promises, she murmured. The lounge doors opened with a sharp sound. Conversations dipped slightly as a woman entered. Tall, flawless, wrapped in a designer trench coat that practically announced her wealth. 2 staff members followed behind her, struggling with expensive luggage. I don't care what you were told, she said loudly into her phone. I want seat 1A. You promised me 1A. At the desk, the agent hesitated. Ma'am, there seems to be a small issue. Seat 1A is already assigned. Assigned to who? The woman snapped. Elena glanced down at her boarding pass. Seat 1A. A faint, knowing smile touched her lips. Interesting, she whispered. Boarding was smooth. Elena entered early, slipped into seat 1A and made herself invisible. Shoes off, hood up, headphones on. Within minutes, she looked like someone who didn't belong in first class at all. Exactly how she wanted it. 10 minutes later, the atmosphere changed. A strong, expensive perfume filled the air before the voice arrived. Excuse me, and no response. I know you're awake. Tap, tap, tap. Elena exhaled quietly and lowered her headphones. Yes. You're in my seat. Elena glanced at the seat display beside her. 1A looks correct. The woman's lips tightened. You don't understand. I always sit here. Then today is different, Elena replied calmly. A few passengers nearby shifted, sensing tension. The woman stepped closer, her eyes scanning Elena from head to toe. Hoodie, sneakers, no effort to impress. Her expression twisted into something sharp and dismissive. People like you, she said under her breath, don't belong up here. The cabin fell quiet. Elena looked at her properly now. And people like you, she said just as quietly, forget how to behave. A flight attendant hurried over, clearly nervous. Is everything all right, ma'am? No, the woman snapped. This girl is in my seat. Remove her. The attendant checked the manifest. Ma'am, seat 1A is assigned to Miss Brooks. I don't care what your system says. And then she crossed the line. She grabbed Elena's backpack from the floor and threw it into the aisle. Crack. The sound of the laptop breaking echoed through the cabin. Everything stopped. Elena stood up slowly, very slowly. Her calm hadn't disappeared. It had sharpened into something dangerous. You just made a very expensive mistake, she said softly. The woman laughed. Oh, please. I'll buy you 10 of whatever cheap thing that was. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Dialed. Marcus. A pause. Code black. Flight 221 to Zurich. A few passengers exchanged glances. Someone even chuckled quietly. The woman smirked. This is ridiculous. Moments later, the captain arrived, clearly irritated. What's going on here? Elena looked at him, her expression unreadable. Wait 10 seconds, he frowned. Or what? Elena glanced at her watch. 3, 2, 2, 1. The lights flickered. The soft hum of the aircraft died instantly. Air systems shut down. A heavy silence filled the cabin. "What's happening?" someone whispered. The captain grabbed the interphone, confusion turning into alarm. "What do you mean override?" "All systems?" Passengers' phones began buzzing all at once. "It's on the news. Novacore just froze aviation systems." The woman's phone rang. Her hands shook slightly as she answered. "Hello?" A frantic voice shouted from the other end. "Who are you arguing with?" "That's Elena Brooks. She owns the airline." The phone slipped from her hand. It hit the floor with a dull sound. Elena calmly sat back down in seat 1A, crossed her legs, composed, silent, in control. She looked directly at the woman. "Now," she said softly, "we can talk." The silence in the cabin felt heavier now, not confused, not curious, fearful. The woman stood frozen in the aisle, her confidence gone, replaced by something far less stable. "No, that's not possible," she whispered, shaking her head. "This is some kind of joke." Elena didn't respond. She simply sat there, composed, her fingers resting lightly on the armrest, as if nothing unusual had happened. The captain turned toward her slowly. "You," he said, his voice no longer authoritative, just uncertain. "What did you do?" Elena tilted her head slightly. "I asked for 10 seconds, she replied calmly. "You chose not to listen." The captain swallowed. Behind him, the flight attendant stood completely still, eyes wide, glancing between Elena and the woman. "Ma'am," he tried again, softer this time. "We're getting alerts from operations. Every system is locked. They're saying it's a network-level override." Elena nodded once. That would be correct. A murmur spread through the cabin. Passengers were now openly watching, some recording, some whispering urgently into their phones. The woman, Nina, took a shaky step back. "You're lying," she said. Louder now, desperate. "You're just trying to scare me." Elena finally looked directly at her. "No," she said quietly. "I'm trying to show you what consequences look like." The captain's radio crackled. A voice came through, tense, urgent. "Flight 221, do not proceed with pushback." "Repeat, do not proceed. You are under executive hold authorization." The captain stared at the receiver like it had betrayed him. "Executive hold," he repeated. The voice came back sharper. "Authorized by Novacore Systems. Immediate compliance required." The captain slowly lowered the device, and then he looked at Elena again, really looked this time. The hoodie, the calm posture, the complete lack of panic, and something inside him shifted. Nina's phone rang again. She fumbled to pick it up from the floor. "Hello?" A man's voice exploded through the speaker. "Nina, what did you do? Do you have any idea who that is?" I don't know what you're talking about." "That's Elena Brooks. Novacore, she owns the airline now." Nina's face drained of color. No, that's not." "You better fix this right now," the voice shouted. "Our contracts, our accounts, everything is tied to them." The call ended. Her hand dropped to her side, slowly, helplessly. Elena stood up, not rushed, not angry, just inevitable. She stepped into the aisle, her presence shifting the entire energy of the cabin. "You threw my bag," she said quietly. Nina nodded weakly, tears forming in her eyes. I didn't know. That's the point." Elena's voice didn't rise, but it carried. "You didn't know who I was, so you decided I didn't matter?" The words hit harder than any shout. "I'm sorry," Nina whispered. "It was a misunderstanding." Elena glanced down at her broken laptop lying in the aisle, the cracked screen, the bent casing. "Marcus," she said, speaking into her phone again. "Yes, ma'am," a voice replied instantly. "Estimate the value of the data stored on my primary device." A pause. "Ma'am, that system contained encrypted merger keys and live transaction frameworks. Estimated exposure, $42 million. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Nina staggered slightly. 40? "I'll pay it," she said quickly. "I'll cover everything." Elena looked at her, not with anger, with disappointment. "It's not about the money." Footsteps thundered down the jet bridge, heavy, fast. The cabin door opened sharply. 2 airport security officers entered, followed by a man in a dark suit, sharp, controlled. "Authoritative, Miss Brooks," he said. stopping in front of her, lowering his head slightly. "We received your override request. The network lockdown is in effect." The entire cabin watched in stunned silence. The captain stepped back instinctively. Naina looked between them, panic rising fast. Wait, there's no need for this." The suited man turned to her. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." "For what?" she snapped, her voice breaking. "This is ridiculous." Elena spoke before he could answer. "For destruction of corporate property," she said calmly. "And for creating a security disturbance on a controlled aircraft." Naina's eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I am." Elena stepped closer. "You wanted this seat so badly," she said quietly. "You were willing to humiliate someone for it." Naina shook her head rapidly. "I said I'm sorry, please." "And if I wasn't who I am?" Elena asked. Silence. That question landed hard. The security officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, please come with us." Naina didn't resist. She couldn't. As they guided her toward the exit, every passenger watched, some recording, some just staring. The woman who walked in like she owned the world was now being escorted out of it. As the door closed behind her, the cabin remained silent for a few seconds. Then, someone started clapping, slowly. Then another, and another. Within moments, the entire first-class cabin erupted into applause. Elena didn't smile. She simply turned, picked up her damaged bag and handed it to one of the staff. "Get this replaced," she said calmly. "Yes, ma'am." She sat back down in seat 1A, the same seat, but now, no one questioned it. The captain approached again, his tone completely different. "Miss Brooks, I sincerely apologize. If I had known..." Elena looked at him. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is," she said quietly, "to treat them with respect." He lowered his gaze. "Yes, ma'am." Elena leaned back, closing her eyes again. The cabin lights softened. Systems slowly restarted. The plane prepared for departure once more. But the energy had changed completely because everyone on board had just learned something. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in a hoodie and waits. The aircraft finally pushed back from the gate. Engines roared back to life. Systems stabilized. And the cabin slowly returned to what looked like normal, but it wasn't normal anymore. Not for anyone on that flight. And definitely not for Elena. She sat in seat 1A, her new replacement laptop already open, fingers moving smoothly across the keyboard, calm on the outside. But her mind was working fast, too fast. Something about the situation didn't sit right. Naina's reaction. Her desperation for that specific seat. It wasn't just arrogance, it felt planned. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Ma'am?" Elena looked up. The same flight attendant stood there, posture straighter now, voice respectful. "We're preparing for takeoff. Is there anything you need?" Elena studied him for a moment. "What's your name?" "Daniel, ma'am." "Daniel," she said quietly. "Bring me the passenger manifest for this flight." He hesitated. "Ma'am, that's restricted." "Elena," she corrected gently. A pause. Then he nodded. "I'll get it." 10 minutes later, the plane lifted into the night sky. City lights faded beneath them. The world below became distant, and inside the cabin, a different kind of tension began to build. Daniel returned, discreetly handing her a tablet. "The manifest," he said quietly. Elena gave a small nod. "Thank you," she began, scrolling names, seats, background tags. Business, travelers, families, executives, routine, until her finger stopped. Seat 2F, Victor, Hale. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. That name, she leaned back thinking. Victor Hale wasn't just a passenger. He was a financial strategist, high-level, dangerously smart. And more importantly, he had ties to companies currently under investigation for offshore laundering. Elena slowly looked up across the aisle. Seat 2FA. Man sat there relaxed, reading a newspaper like nothing in the world concerned him. Mid-40s, clean-cut, calm, too calm. "Daniel," Elena said softly. He stepped closer. "Yes? Has that passenger interacted with anyone before boarding?" Daniel glanced quickly. "No, ma, Elena," he boarded quietly. No issues. Elena nodded. Keep an eye on him. She turned back to her laptop, her system connected to Novacore's secure network. Lines of encrypted data began flowing across the screen. She typed quickly, pulling records, cross-checking. And then her screen flashed, a flagged transaction linked to Victor Hale, destination Zurich. Timestamp tonight, amount unlisted. Elena's expression changed just slightly. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, talk to me, she said quietly. Ma'am, we've got a situation, he replied. After your override, we started digging. That woman, Nina, she's connected to multiple shell accounts. Elena's eyes flicked toward the empty aisle where Nina had stood earlier. Go on. There's more, Marcus continued. Those accounts are linked to a larger network. We're seeing patterns, art shipments, digital assets, unregistered transfers. Elena's voice dropped. Money laundering? Yes, and not small scale. Elena leaned back slowly. Her gaze drifted toward seat 2F again. Victor. Hale hadn't moved, still calm, still reading. Marcus, she said, her tone sharpening. Tell me something. Yes, ma'am. If you were running a large-scale laundering operation, how would you move data without detection? A pause. Not digitally, Marcus said. Too risky. You'd use physical transfer points. Something mobile. Something secure. Elena's eyes darkened slightly. A plane, she whispered. Everything clicked. Nina. Seat. 1A, her obsession with that specific space. The bulkhead storage, the blind spot. Elena, Marcus said urgently. We think tonight's flight might be a transfer run. Elena didn't respond immediately. Her gaze locked onto Victor Hale, who, at that exact moment, folded his newspaper and looked directly at her. For the first time, no panic, no surprise, just a faint, knowing smile. Elena slowly closed her laptop. Daniel, she said quietly. He appeared instantly. Yes, I need you to do exactly what I say. No questions, his throat tightened. Understood. Lock the cockpit. No external communication unless it's through official air traffic control. Daniel blinked. Elena, is something wrong? She stood up, and this time, there was no calm softness left, only precision. We're not just flying to Zurich, she said quietly. We're carrying something. Across the aisle, Victor Hale stood up smoothly, like he had been waiting for this moment. Well, he said, adjusting his cufflinks. I was wondering how long it would take you to figure it out. The cabin went silent again. Every head turned. Elena stepped into the aisle. You picked the wrong flight, she said coldly. Victor smiled. No, he replied. I picked the perfect one. A pause. Tense. Electric. Then he leaned slightly closer. You grounded the network, he said softly. Which means you isolated yourself. Elena didn't flinch. You think I'm trapped? She asked. Victor's smile widened. I think, he said. You just walked into a game much bigger than a seat. From the back of the cabin, 2 more passengers stood up. Then another and another, casual before now. Alert, watching, positioning. Daniel stepped back, fear creeping into his face. Elena. She didn't look away from Victor. How many? She asked quietly. Victor chuckled. Enough. The plane cruised at 35,000 feet, miles above the ground. No escape, no backup, no easy way. Out. Elena exhaled slowly, then she smiled, not calmly, not politely, but like someone who had just been given exactly what they wanted. A game, she said softly. Victor tilted his head yes. Elena stepped closer, lowered her voice. Good, she whispered. Because I don't lose. The cabin lights dimmed, slightly. The tension snapped tighter, and somewhere deep in the aircraft something far more dangerous than a seat. Dispute had just begun. The cabin didn't feel like a cabin anymore. It felt like a battlefield, silent, controlled. One wrong move away from chaos. Elena stood in the aisle, facing Victor Hale. Behind him, 3 others had already shifted from passengers to something else entirely. Alert. Calculating, ready. Daniel had quietly disappeared toward the galley, exactly as instructed. Good. At least one piece was in place. Victor adjusted his sleeve. Calm as ever. You're impressive, he said casually. Most people would still be arguing about a seat. Elena didn't blink. And most criminals, she replied, aren't arrogant enough to operate in plain sight. A faint smirk. Arrogance? Victor said. No, efficiency. A man from row 4 stepped into the aisle. Another blocked the rear. Subtle, but deliberate. Passengers were starting to notice now. Whispers. Uneasy glances. Phones slowly being lowered, instinct kicking in. Something was wrong. Elena took one step forward. Not aggressive. Measured. You're not here for money, she said. Not directly. Victor tilted his head slightly. Go on. You're moving data, Elena continued. Physical backups encrypted off-grid. A pause. Then, Victor smiled wider. There it is, he said softly. That's why you're dangerous. Elena's eyes flicked briefly to his jacket. Right side, a slight weight shift. Inner pocket. Hard drives, she said. Victor didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned closer. 3 of them, he whispered. Worth more than everything on this aircraft combined. Behind Elena, a passenger stood up nervously. What's going on? No one answered. Because no one wanted to be wrong. Victor straightened. You see, he said calmly, addressing her like they were alone. You disrupted the system tonight. Elena crossed her arms. Good. Yes? He nodded. Good for you. Beat. Bad for us. One of his men moved. Closer. Too close, Elena. Didn't look at him. Tell him to stop, she said, quietly. Victor didn't. So Elena did something. Unexpected, she smiled and stepped even closer to Victor. Close enough that only he could hear her. You're not in control, she whispered. Victor's eyes flickered. Just slightly. That was all she needed. Suddenly, click, the cockpit door locked from inside. A sharp mechanical sound echoed then. Daniel's voice came over the cabin. Intercom. Unsteady, but clear. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We are experiencing a temporary internal security protocol. Passengers. Froze. Victor's men reacted instantly. One turned toward the cockpit. Another reached into his jacket. Elena moved. First, fast, precise, she grabbed Victor's wrist before he could react, twisted sharply, and a small metallic object dropped from his hand onto the floor. A data drive. Gasps filled the cabin. Don't, Elena said quietly, not loud but enough. Victor froze for the first time. He wasn't smiling. You're good, he admitted under his breath. No, Elena replied. From the galley to airline security. Personnel stepped out, not loud, not dramatic, but ready. Daniel hadn't just locked the cockpit, he'd triggered internal protocol. Victor glanced at them, then back at Elena. You planned this? He asked. Elena shook her head. Slightly, no, she said. A pause. Adapted. The man near row 4 made a move and instantly found himself staring at 2 trained security officers. Sit down, one of them said firmly. This time, he listened. Victor slowly raised his hands, not defeated, just reconsidering. You realize, he said quietly. This doesn't end here. Elena met his gaze. It already did. She bent down, picked up the fallen drive, held it up. This, she said, was your entire operation. Victor exhaled, then laughed softly. Not nervous, not scared, just amused. You really think that's all of it? Elena didn't react, but inside something shifted. Victor leaned in one last time. You stopped a shipment, he whispered. Not the system. A long pause. Heavy, then he stepped back. Go ahead, he said. Finish this. Security moved in. One by one, his team was restrained. No resistance, too clean, too easy. That was the problem. Elena stood there, the drive in her hand, her mind racing now. Too easy, too controlled, too intentional. Her phone vibrated. Marcus. Elena. His voice came through urgently. We have a problem. Her grip tightened. Talk. That network we traced? He said. It just activated again. Elena's eyes snapped toward Victor, who was now being held but smiling again. From where? She asked sharply. Marcus hesitated, then said, "Not from the ground." A pause. A heavy, sinking realization. It's coming from inside the aircraft. Elena slowly turned, her eyes scanning the cabin. Every passenger, every seat, every face. Victor's voice echoed behind her, soft, satisfied. "Told you," he said. This was bigger than a seat. Elena didn't respond, because now she understood. Victor wasn't the threat. He was just the distraction. And somewhere on this plane, the real player was still hidden. The cabin lights had barely dimmed after the chaos when Kendra finally allowed herself to sit still. Not relax. Not sleep. Just still. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm when your mind is too sharp to accept peace. Outside the oval window, Zurich was shrinking behind them, swallowed by clouds and distance. Inside, the hum of the engines was steady again, almost polite, like nothing had happened at all. But everything had happened. Behind her, the flight crew moved differently now. No rushed voices. No confusion. No arrogance. Every instruction came with a pause, a double check. A respect that wasn't there before. Respect born from fear usually lasts longer than respect born from admiration. Kendra knew that. She didn't like it, but she used it anyway. Liam quietly placed a fresh glass of water on her tray without saying a word. His hands were still slightly shaking, not from exhaustion but from the realization that the last few hours of his life had taken place inside something much bigger than an airline dispute. It had been a war, disguised as a flight. Kendra didn't look at him when she spoke. "Is the cabin secure?" Liam swallowed. "Yes. Ms. Reynolds, federal clearance confirmed. No unauthorized access. No external communications without your approval." She nodded once. "Good." She finally leaned back, opening her new laptop. The replacement one, clean, unbroken, silent, like nothing had ever touched it except now. Everything touched everything. On the screen, David's messages were still flowing in. David. Preston's arrest is all over global feeds. Board members are flipping. Stock volatility is insane, up 9%, then down 3%, then stabilizing. Also, regulators want a statement from you. Kendra stared at the last line for a moment. Longer than the others. A statement, of course they did. Everyone always wanted her to explain herself after she had already done the impossible. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then stopped. Because something didn't feel finished yet. Not Preston, not Sylvia, not even the board coup. There was still a gap in the story that didn't make sense. She opened the decrypted ledger file again, rows of transactions, names, routes, cargo codes, private clearances, and then she saw it. A pattern, not random, not reactive, coordinated. Every illegal shipment that had moved through Vanguard Airways over the last 18 months had one subtle similarity. Scheduling anomaly and seat allocations. Not cargo, not passengers. Seats. Kendra narrowed her eyes. That shouldn't matter. Unless... She leaned forward slowly. "Liam," she said without looking away from the screen. "Yes, ma'am?" "Pull the full seating logs for the last 40 international flights. Not just manifests. I want seat change history. Every swap. Every last-minute upgrade. Every denied request." Liam hesitated. "That will take time. The system is partially locked down from the incident." Kendra finally looked at him. That look ended the sentence before it finished. "Then use manual logs." "Yes, ma'am." He left faster than he entered. Silence returned, but now it wasn't calm. It was the kind of silence that happens right before you realize the fire wasn't outside the building. It was inside the foundation. Her laptop pinged. Again, David. "Kendra, there's something else. You're not going to like this," she typed back immediately. "Say it." A long pause. Then David. "Preston wasn't running this alone. There's a second authorization signature buried in the system. It's older, cleaner, higher clearance." Kendra's eyes tightened slightly. "Name. 3 dots. Then, David. You're going to think this is a glitch." Another pause, then the line appeared. ETH Core. Admin, System Architect Clearance Holder. Unknown Executive Board Override. Key and underneath it, a timestamp. 3 years ago. Before Kendra ever became CEO. Before the takeover. Before Vanguard, airways even started collapsing. Her expression didn't change. But something inside her did. Because she understood. Something very dangerous in that moment. Preston wasn't the origin, he was just the cleanup crew. And someone else had been steering the system. Long before her name ever entered the boardroom, the plane dipped slightly through turbulence. The seat lights flickering for half a second. Nobody reacted. Not anymore. Kendra closed the file, then stood up. She walked slowly toward the cockpit. No urgency. No panic. Just certainty. When she entered, the captain, new captain now, immediately straightened. Ms. Reynolds, everything is stable. Zurich Control confirms smooth descent. I know, she said calmly. She stepped closer to the cockpit glass, watching the clouds part beneath them. Change route, she said. The captain blinked. Ma'am, don't land in Zurich, a pause. That's not possible without clearance from... I am clearance, she interrupted. The cockpit went quiet. Even the engine seemed louder in response. Kendra turned slightly. Divert to the secondary private airfield in Geneva. Full isolation protocol. No external communication until I authorize it. The captain hesitated for exactly 1 second too long. Then nodded. Yes, ma'am. Because people like Kendra didn't need permission. They needed confirmation, and everyone eventually learned the difference. Back in her seat, she reopened the ledger file again. And this time, she did something she hadn't done before. She traced backwards, not transactions, not names, motives, and there it was. A single recurring node hidden in the routing data. A corporate shell entity buried under 7 offshore layers. Vanta Aerospace Holdings. Kendra stared at it. She had never approved that name, never seen it in any acquisition report, never voted on it in any board session, and yet it sat at the center of the network like a spider in a web that had been spun long before she ever arrived. Her phone vibrated. Unknown. Number, she answered. No greeting, just silence on the other end. Then a voice, calm, male, familiar, in a way she couldn't place immediately. You shouldn't have grounded the fleet. Kendra leaned back slightly. Who is this? A faint chuckle. You already know. She didn't respond. The voice continued. You think you took over Vanguard Airways? Another pause. You didn't take anything. You inherited a system that was already running. Kendra's eyes narrowed. And you are? A soft exhale. Let's call me the person who kept it stable while everyone else thought they were in charge. The line clicked, disconnected. Kendra sat very still. Outside, the plane began its descent into Geneva. Below them, the clouds opened like a wound. And for the first time since the flight began, Kendra Reynolds understood something unsettling. She hadn't ended a corruption ring. She had interrupted it, and someone had just noticed. The descent into Geneva was unusually smooth, almost too smooth for a flight that had already carried chaos, arrests, and corporate collapse inside its cabin. Kendra noticed it immediately. Silence on a plane is never just silence. It is either control or anticipation. She closed her laptop slowly as the wheels of the aircraft lowered with a heavy mechanical thud. Outside, the Swiss landscape unfolded beneath them like a carefully painted illusion. Green valleys, distant snowcaps, orderly roads that looked too calm to belong to the storm she had just created in the corporate world. But Kendra wasn't looking at the scenery. She was replaying the call. You inherited a system that was already running. That wasn't a threat. It was a statement from someone who believed she had walked into their architecture, not the other way around, and that was the part that bothered her most because Kendra Reynolds didn't build empires by misunderstanding foundations. The landing gear hit the runway. A low vibration ran through the cabin. Liam appeared beside her seat almost instantly, like he had been waiting for permission to exist again. Ms. Reynolds, we've landed. Geneva Private Sector Terminal is secured. No press access. No external personnel without clearance, she nodded. Good. But she didn't move. Liam hesitated. Security is requesting you disembark first. Protocol due to recent events. Kendra finally looked at him. Tell them no. He blinked. Ma'am, I don't leave first because I caused a problem. she said calmly. I leave when I understand it. Liam swallowed and backed away. The aircraft rolled to a stop in a secluded hangar zone surrounded by reinforced glass and Swiss federal security vehicles. Outside, black SUVs were already forming a perimeter, waiting. Not reacting. Waiting always meant they already knew more than they were showing. Kendra stood, pulled her hoodie straight, picked up her backpack. The same one that had been thrown, stepped on, broken, and replaced, and walked forward. This time, no one blocked her. The cabin door opened with a hydraulic sigh. Cold Geneva air rushed in, sharp and clean, carrying the smell of rain and metal. She stepped onto the stairs and stopped halfway down. Because at the bottom, there were not just police, there were analysts.tech, enforcement.corporate, regulators, and one man standing slightly ahead of all of them, older, calm posture, no visible weapon. But the kind of presence that made armed officers stand a little straighter. He looked up at her and smiled. Slightly, Ms. Reynolds, he said. Kendra didn't answer. Immediately, she studied him instead. You're not Swiss Federal Police, he nodded. No, pause. You're the one from the call, she said. The man tilted his head. Slightly. I suppose I am. She descended. The last step slowly, each step deliberate. Measuring distance. Measuring intent. When she reached the ground, the wind shifted slightly between them. Name, she said. The man didn't hesitate. Director Adrian Vale. Something. In the air tightened, not fear recognition, because that name wasn't in any public registry connected to aviation. It wasn't in Vanguard's board files. It wasn't in any merger documentation. It was, buried intentionally. Kendra stepped closer. You built Vanta Aerospace Holdings. A faint smile. I designed it. Same thing, she said. No, he replied calmly. Building is ownership. Designing is control. That line landed heavier than anything Sylvia or Preston had ever said. Behind them, officers stayed silent, waiting for instruction that wasn't coming yet. Kendra folded her arms. You've been using Vanguard Airways as infrastructure for laundering operations. Vale didn't deny it. I've been using global aviation networks as infrastructure for stability. Stability, she repeated. Yes, he said. What you call corruption is often just governance that hasn't been properly labeled. Yet, Kendra let out a slow breath. You moved billions through passenger logistics systems. I optimized unused capacity, he corrected. She stared at him. You hid illegal cargo behind seat allocation systems and executive overrides, he nodded slightly. Integrated risk into seating logic, yes. A pause. Kendra's voice dropped. You turned human beings into routing variables. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not guilt, not shame, calculation. No, he said. I turned chaos into predictability. Silence stretched between them. Behind Kendra, Liam stood frozen near the aircraft stairs. The wing officers didn't move. Even the wind felt like it had slowed down. Kendra finally spoke. Again, you called me on the, plane. Yes. You triggered the system. Lockout. Yes. Why? Vale studied her for a moment, then said something unexpected. Because Preston was going to collapse. Kendra's eyes narrowed slightly. Explain, he glanced toward the aircraft behind. Her Vanguard Airways was never just an airline. It was a controlled corridor. Passenger transport was the visible layer. Beneath it were financial channels, intelligence exchanges, and asset movement routes used by multiple governments, corporations, and independent entities. He paused, and Preston started leaking pressure. Kendra didn't interrupt. He was greedy. Vale continued. Greed is manageable. Chaos is not. You were introduced as a corrective measure. A consolidation event. Kendra's voice sharpened. I am not your system update. Vale nodded once. That is where the disagreement begins. Behind him, one of the federal agents stepped forward slightly. Director Vale, we should proceed with containment protocol. Vale raised one hand. The agent stopped immediately. No, hesitation. That told Kendra everything. Wasn't just respected here. He was followed. Kendra stepped closer until she was only a few feet away. If you were in control of Vanguard, Airways, she said slowly. Why let me take it? Fail met her gaze. Because systems don't survive without stress. Testing, a pause, and you are very good at stress. That answer should have felt like manipulation. But it didn't. It felt like truth wrapped in arrogance. Kendra looked away briefly, toward the runway lights stretching into the fog. Then back at him. You used Sylvia Pendergast. You used Richard. You used Preston. I used existing instability vectors, he corrected. And if I hadn't stopped it? Vale's expression remained steady. Then the system would have corrected itself another way. That was the moment Kendra understood something darker. He didn't see himself as criminal. He didn't even see himself as villain. He saw himself as infrastructure. Something permanent, something inevitable. She exhaled slowly. You think I'm part of your system? No, I think you already were, he said. A beat, then added. You just didn't know where your authority came from. That line hit differently, because Kendra had built herself from nothing. Or so she thought. She stepped back slightly. No, she said quietly. I built my authority. I earned it. Vale nodded. Both can be true. Behind them, one of the SUVs started its engine. The sound echoed across the hangar. Kendra looked at him one last time. So what now? Vale adjusted his coat slightly. Now you decide whether you want to govern the system or dismantle it. A pause. And I assure you, Ms. Reynolds, dismantling it is significantly more expensive. Kendra gave a faint, humorless smile. I don't make decisions based on cost. I know, he said. That was the first time he sounded almost approving. She turned slightly toward the waiting security line, then stopped. And Vale? Yes? If I find out you're lying. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. He understood anyway. I would expect nothing less, he said. Kendra walked past him, toward the SUVs, toward the unknown layer beneath. The system she had just broken into. Behind her, the aircraft doors closed, and the plane that had once carried chaos became silent again. But this time, Kendra knew the real flight hadn't even started yet.